And at that time, that sea had a lot of salt in it. Over time, the salt was deposited, and that's what you're seeing on the walls is that salt. So this is the self-guided portion, so take your time, explore at your own pace. You'll start here, you'll head down that way. When you hit the end, there will be another employee. They'll point you off in the right direction, tell you about your rides and all that. But other than that, you guys are good to go.
So it was like a
275 million.
stay behind. What?
So all the places like the same stuff in the salt, right?
Yeah, but they have some other things too, like mud and stuff. It's probably not pure. There was, that's all we went down.
हफ्ते परेर सीबाट कसरी जम्यो होला है त्यो छ र पाकिस्तानमा के देखा छ
त्यहाँ पनि छ
बनाउनु पर्ने रहेछ जर्मन अस्ट्रेलिया युनाइटेड स्टेट्समा इरान स्विजरल्यान्ड चीन कनाडा
Here's where you live.
बत्ती कसरी बल्दैछ Where is I?
Where is I? I think
Yes. I'm here. Salt enough. 275 million years old. Marvelous. Don't touch like this. Please hold with her. हेर्न मठ माटो पनि कति कडा माटो साल डस्ट It's a big chunk of salt. Salt separate. 1 cubic foot of loose salt weighs about 70 to 80 pounds, but jumps to 135 pounds when in pure crystal form. This one is really big salt. It used to be under the ocean like this. The salt bed in which you are standing was deposited during the Permian period between 99 and 251 million years ago. Million. Did you heard that? Million. Fossils. They have found some fossils. Huh?
The other cutter is a chainsaw that cuts into the bottom of the line fix, which is the wall allowed to be mined. The blade cuts an inch, 8 or 9 feet deep into the wall, and about 6 inches high. This cut weakens the wall, making the blast more efficient and giving the salt a place to fall. A skilled miner can undercut a 50-foot wall in 25 minutes. A miner generally drills 26 holes into a 40-foot
This is the
base,
tools
which
they used to
takes
cut
5
the
minutes.
rocks, dig the holes.
The mine has several types of drills.
Look at the
operation.
hikers.
Some drills at this mine actually take you to 19
They use
minutes,
this
and
hikers.
have been so well maintained that they're still in use. There have been several improvements, from a simple hose drill to a machine that ran 4 drill bits at one time. This jumbo drill took a 2-man crew and about 1 hours to drill the base. About 1960, it was replaced with a hydraulic drill. This drill reduced manpower drilling time by half. The hydraulic drill also made it easy to change the angles of the holes. Once the miners had prepared
Who is this guy?
with explosives,
My name is Mike Rowe, and this is my job. Damn, this is the oldest. How did this? That olden one, look, 15 cent. 3 doors. One man's dress. The item in this case, namely the idea that what goes in the mind stays in the mind. It is more cost effective in terms of the time and manpower for miners to leave their dresses behind when he's mining an area and not take it, carry outside. No smoking, high explosive. यो मिसिन हेर ल त्यहाँ डिगेर थियो नि
Around 1940, the Carey Salt Company bought a joint loader, partly in response to the shortening labor supply due to World War II. Instead of having to lay rails to the newly blasted muck, the joint loader brought the salt to the track. This loader had arms that swept up the salt off the mine floor and conveyed it into a trolley car.
Look at
As soon
the
as the trolley was filled, it transported the salt to the track and dumped it into the waiting cars to move it to the hoist. One or more loading employees that so many people can haul 6 cubic yards of salt in their front loading buckets.
Look at the bacteria. Harry got sucked out in the sunglasses like he had never seen bacteria.
The skin carries the salt 750 to the surface where it's ready for heating and fine particles. The salt is carried on a conveyor to storage bins that hold the salt until it's transported to the big rail cars to be distributed across the country. The vine, which takes the form of a salt powder, is truly specific.
Okay. Now we're going to this area. This one, come on. This is film related. Shooting film go. Kunci film go shooting go. Black. Things have changed since the 1960s. Motion pictures. Davija O's. If you remember, China. Chocolate.
Just film.
Radiology, that's just example. Here, patients. Pollution गर्दा त्यस्तो भएर रेडिएसनले गर्दाखेरि oil and gas data same thing drawings. Look at the newspaper, the New York Herald. Was the year 1865. 1865. This is the typewriter. Really? Okay?
IBM system.
iPod Nano. Storage. 38 computer. 65 MB. बुझे
Storage 8000 MB iPad Nano को 230 देना IBM system 64 MB को त्यो बेलामा 1991,000 of 2007 2,74,000 price evolution हुँदै आयो active real floppy disks
and after this track tab floppy disks. This is optical disks. Got this tab and that's just make it smaller. Ali, Will Smith. I want to see this movie. Really, I want to see this movie. Ali. यहाँ पनि हो होइन एकमा हाल्नु न Korea train pretty the war. Look at this. So this might be the film marketing the movies. Look important stories. Yeah, post lah ya. Let's go there.
Remember, for your safety, you must remain seated at all times. Keep your hands and feet inside the train, and do not raise your hands above the top of your head. All aboard the Salt Mine Express. In the wall to your right is a bulkhead. A bulkhead is what the miners call a wall that was used to direct airflow. This bulkhead is made of 1.5-inch thick tongue and groove planks, supported by 6-inch by 6-inch timbers, and sealed with black tar paper on the backside to keep air from that part of the mine from coming into this side. It was slowly being crushed by the roof, but as you can see, it finally came down. On the platform are a couple of two-thumbed gloves. In the 1940s, when this area was being mined, everyone conserved materials for the war effort. The miners would wear the gloves until they wore out the palms. Then they would wear them on the opposite hands, using the second set of thumbs until they wore out the backs of the gloves. Now, stories have been told that Mr. Carey, the owner of the Carey Salt Mine, was always after the miners to pick up their trash and not contaminate the salt. Well, apparently a miner rolled up these gloves and stuffed them in a blasting hole, because that's where we found them 60 years later when we opened this part of the museum. Now, if you look closely at the salt wall to the right, it appears there's enough stuffed in a blasting hole. As you look to your left, you'll see a rare sight, what the miners call a roof fall. The pieces on the floor used to be the roof, but over a number of years, the salt started sagging away from the compacted mud layer above it and eventually fell. Now, even though only a few rooms ever develop a roof sag, everywhere in the mine that people will walk, drive, or ride, we monitor the roof, and sags are removed when necessary. Can you imagine how it must have sounded when this roof fell?
Sto kasar mo sih. Oh, ya, great. Now I want to say something.
From 1923 to 1983, the miners used a rail system to transport salt from the mine face to the salt skip, where it was hoisted topside. Then, in 1983, they switched to a conveyor belt system. On the left is a car that was used to haul salt and railroad track. Everything that comes down in the mine stays in the mine. And if you look at the lit area, you'll see that this is even true of mining trash. Now, we know this area was mined in the 1940s and used as a break area in the 1950s. And we found many name brand products in this trash pile from that time period, and some of which are still around today. There are a couple of things that we noticed here. One, there's a calendar from 1953 on the floor by the rocks on the left. And two, when we found it over by the pillar, the gray trash can, well, it was empty. We consider all these items to be artifacts, which only proves one person's trash is another's treasure.
ट्र्याकहरू नि खियाइसकेको सबै है ट्रेनको अलिक स्मुथ बनाउनुपर्छ नि ट्रेन
In case you were wondering, trash isn't the only thing miners left underground. And apparently this area was used as a restroom. Oh, no fancy porta pots here. And they weren't very careful with the toilet paper either. And this is one reason we say, don't lick the salt. As we round the curve up ahead, two spotlights will come on. The first on the left will highlight a stack of empty cardboard dynamite boxes. Then on the right, you'll see a pillar that is scaling or spalling. This means that the salt is breaking away from the wall. And like roof sags and floor heaves, this is a natural occurrence in a salt mine. And as your ride continues, keep in mind, we've tried to leave the mine just as it was years ago. Now, when we get to the station,
is the rail bed. From 1923 to 1983, the rail bed was the lifeblood of the mine, as it was the only way to get salt from the salt face to the salt skip. We did that using locomotives like this orange one with the number 1 on the side of it. This was called the Galloping Goose. Its suspension was wound so tightly it would bounce up and down. Then you can see the gooseneck power cable that ran up to the ceiling there, so that's where they got those from. Even though it said 1 on the side of it, it's actually a backup engine because the miners didn't like it a whole lot. They'd use locomotives like that to pull ore carts. You can see these 4-ton ones labeled CSC for Carey Salt Company on the side of them. At one point, they would hold 4 tons of salt each. 2 miners called muckers were given a brass chip that was worth 50 cents for every one of these that they filled up. They would work in teams of 2, and a good team of 2 could usually fill up about 8 over the course of a day. So they would make about $4 a piece, which back during the Great Depression, when this area is being mined out, was a pretty decent wage at the time. Now today we use a conveyor belt system to take salt out of the mine. You can tell whenever we're taking salt or people out, because when you go topside, there's a building with a wheel at the top of it. Whenever that wheel is spinning, that means they're taking salt or people out. We only blast from about 12 to 2 a.m. and when we blast, we use what you can see in the bags on the far left side of this cart here. That stands for ammonium nitrate fuel oil, and that's a powder that you'll blow into the blasting hole, run a fuse through it, and that's your explosive that you'll use. It's a lot more efficient than the dynamite that we originally used, which you can see in the boxes on the far right side here and also in the middle. We used these wooden boxes on the right up until World War II, and we switched the cardboard boxes to help save wood for the war effort. And then we switched from dynamite to ANFO in about the 1960s, and we still use that today. Because it's a powder, it's a lot safer but more efficient than dynamite, so it's a great material to use for blasting. As we get going out here, you'll notice the pillars change in size. This one off to the right is the last large 300-foot pillar. From here on out, they'll all be 50-foot pillars. The area that you were in earlier was mined out in the 20s and the 30s. They didn't have a lot of equipment at the time that they needed to move around, so they used those large 300-foot pillars. This area is mined out in the 40s and the 50s. They had a lot more equipment, so they used these smaller 50-foot pillars because it was a lot easier to move equipment around. This method was called the room and pillar style of mining. You'd blast it into a room like we're in right now, then use the pillars to help support the roof. Off to the right up here, you'll be able to see what are called the ribs in the face of mining. These are created by blasting. When we originally got the terms ribs and face from coal mining, because back in the 1920s, when you were mining for coal, you'd be crawling through a small, about 1.5 foot tall tunnel. So they called it the ribs, the part that juts out, because it was right at the miner's ribs when they were crawling through. Then the face, the solid wall behind, was right at your face. Looks like the light died, so you guys get the extra dark tour here. If you look above you, you'll be able to see something else that comes from coal mining, that scrolling pattern up on the ceiling there. That was done by a continuous miner that was purchased from underground vaults and storage. Purchased by underground vaults and storage from a coal mining company. What that continuous miner is, it's a machine with a large rotating drum head on it, and an operator will use an extension cord and a remote control to raise and lower that drum head, because when it was air. What you can see here is what we call a gob wall. That's those same dynamite boxes from earlier. They would fill those full of extra salt that they had and then stack them on top of themselves to form a makeshift wall. They would use these to wall off areas that they had already blasted into. Then they would use a fan blade that we'll see a little later on to push air to wherever they were actively mining. The reason why they would fill these full of extra salt that they had, because if they didn't, the force of the blast would knock them over and they'd have to rebuild it every time. So they filled these full of salt. This one is in very good condition. It's been down here for about 70, 80 years. It was probably constructed on that same exact table you can see beside it there as well. You'll be able to see some very red salt. What that may be is potassium chloride or just iron mixed in the salt. Whatever it is, it has a very bitter taste. I wouldn't recommend reaching up and licking it. The miners actually managed to find this out, because back when they were mining this area, almost all of the salt was used for cattle licks. They didn't have as many roads as we do today, so road salt wasn't really in huge demand like it is today. That one hasn't lasted as well as the other one. It's starting to collapse a little bit. And in the far right, you can see it is the original gob walls, which was just raw salt stacked up on top of itself. They switched the boxes pretty quickly because they realized that the boxes were a lot easier to stack than raw salt. Then on the floor here, you can see what's left of the fan blade in the picture. That was very important, making sure that they could get fresh air and have circulation towards the face of the mine. Eventually, they would switch away from gob walls to curtains that were made out of wool or jute. So what you'll be able to see off to the right here is a 1932 Chevy pickup truck. If you take a look at the engine of that truck, it looks a little different. This is actually an electric-powered vehicle. Not quite as nice as the ones we have today. This ran on a 300-foot long extension cord. So they could drive the truck around in that 300-foot radius. Although sometimes the miners would have games and gambles, see how far they could coast the truck after they pulled the cord out of the wall. They got pretty good at that over time, because the loser would actually have to drag the truck back. Now, once it got down here, that wasn't too big of a deal because it was a lot heavier topside. At one point, it did have a windshield, a roof, and doors. They took that all off and left it topside. No weather down here, so no need for any of that. Just took up extra space in an already. They discovered that using this experiment off to the right here. This was done by the Atomic Energy Commission back in 1958. What they were doing here is measuring to see how fast the floor and the roof would naturally close in on themselves. And with salt being as elastic as it is, they discovered that over the course of thousands and thousands of years, the roof and the floor will naturally close in on themselves. And this area will be sealed up until the way it was before there was a mine here. Now, the rate is very slow in terms of human time, but it is one of the fastest closing in minerals, and they discovered that here. The reason why they were conducting this experiment here is they planned on going out in abandoned parts of the mine, drilling holes and dropping atomic waste down in those holes. And if they did that, it was a safe way to store atomic waste because it would be sealed off naturally. They decided that the salt mine over in Lyons, Kansas was a good place to store that. It was owned by the same man who owned this one. So they went over there, but the people of Lyons would protest that very heavily. There's an aquifer right above their salt mine, just as ours is. They thought it would seep up into that aquifer. Pieces fill up if you'd like. Obviously, don't climb on the pile because it is salt and it's loose.
Lah kuning aja. Kati linya.
You decide if you want just little pieces, you can.
Ismail. Ismail, this smell just again.
Yeah, we're gonna take.
No. Take some salt. Take some shiny one, the white one. Some shiny, some white. I got the one. Search for diamond. You can find the diamond. Take this one. This one is real
See,
big.
I found the red one.
Okay.
Is something else different? Oh, this one. This one.
How about this one? Yeah, this one is good. Enough, let's go. It's enough.
Usually it's more of a good thing with the dust.